I'm going to speak about driving economic growth through skills development. And I've prefaced my presentation on the assumption that the only way we can grow the economy is through entrepreneurial skills. And of course, Her Highness, the Royal Highness mentioned the need to encourage entrepreneurship. So I have a bias towards entrepreneurship, being a serial entrepreneur since the age of 20. So I prepared my presentation into 5 parts, and I'm going to go quickly. And the first one is that the first premise I hope you accept is that we're in a new world that requires us to think differently. The problems we're facing today weren't around even 20 years ago when I was at university. So we have new challenges that require us to think differently. The second premise is that knowledge capital drives economic growth, and I hope to demonstrate that with some data. And the third premise is that entrepreneurial skills are a necessity to driving economic growth. It's great to wax lyrical about education, but what kind of educations do we need as a continent or even as a country to succeed? So I'll talk about that. And then of course, then correlating the two, how the interface between entrepreneurship skills and economic growth will work. And we'll look at some case studies around 4 countries. And the final one is kind of, where should we go? What should we do now that we've come to this acceptance of my 4 premises? The first one, I think it's very clear to everybody that we are living in a very different world. Our children are going to grow up in a different world. And therefore, some of the things we need to think deeply about over the next 10, 15, 20 years require us to accept that the world is no longer the same. The world is volatile, uncertain, have become more complex, and there's a greater sense than more than ever of ambiguity. And it's quite clear when you think about it that we need to start thinking differently about how we solve these problems. And I'm particularly vexed as a South African where people use words like jobless growth. I don't know if that bothers you like it bothers me. And Her Royal Highness mentioned new career streams. My son sits at home with the overly priced education I'm providing for him, and his greatest ambition is to become a vlogger. So if you're not familiar with what a vlogger is, you're behind the trend. It's somebody who sits on YouTube, creates content with the aim of monetizing that content and becoming stupendously wealthy. I have 3 business degrees, and here sits this 14-year-old planning a future that does not involve higher education or even a baseline degree. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the world we're in is quite different to the one we grew up with. We need to set a new vision as Africa, as Africans, not to be left out in this 4th industrial revolution. To skill our children and remove our biases towards traditional education, like I have. I have a deep-seated bias towards university degrees. The more your CV is littered with it, the more I feel confident I can trust you. But my son is not of that ilk. My son is going to skip past that and become a multi-millionaire vlogging. And so will yours too. Finally, also, taking a cue from Habakkuk, look what he says. He says, write the vision, make it plain, that those who see it may run with it. We need to make the vision plain. And in South Africa, we're known for having multiple visions. In psychological terms, that's schizophrenia. We need a vision that will drive us towards driving economic growth using skills. Thank you very much.
It's an honor to be here to speak on the growth of the economy through skills and education. And my name is Zekra Dongo. I am also a founder. I am an entrepreneur in my country, founder German Institute of Professional Studies, and I happen also to be the Secretary General of our association for the private colleges. We are 1,600, and in Kenya we have public-private partnership law. So we are the people who lobby government with the kind of laws that we need for us to move the education sector forward. I also sit in the Education Board of the Private Sector Alliance in my country, and our work is to lobby and to see what skills gap are we having as a country. As we do that, I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but I would have loved to speak from my heart because this is a topic that is so much into the depth of my heart because I went into entrepreneurship at the age of 22. And I have been running German Institute the last 14 years. And I would love to go Africa. So this platform is good for me and for us to do business and to engage each other. I start my presentation with one of the quotes that we believe has transformed China. My previous presenter has talked about the way China is fast growing. For those of us who have had the privilege of visiting the country, you see people start companies behind of their homes. The spirit of entrepreneurship is with everyone. So you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day, but you teach a man to fish, he will eat for a lifetime. This is the spirit that we need to have as Africa. We need to teach our children how to fish and how to do it. So the sort of education that we need is a hypothetical question that I'll leave with all of us. What sort of education do we need? As we go back to our respective countries, what sort of education do we want to see for our children? And I would love my son to become the next Richard Branson, but is our education in Africa giving him that opportunity? So we need to view education as an investment, and I will tell you, as an investor in education, education is part of what we call social entrepreneurship. That you can be in business, make money, at the same time serve humanity. Because as an educationist, we have a calling like that of bishops and pastors because God has entrusted us with lives. So as we go into the entrepreneurship of education, that is social entrepreneurship, we will be taking care of lives as this conference is about trade and investment. There's one man that is called Plato who said, if a man neglects education, he walks lame to the end of his life. We don't want to walk lame as Africa. We want to live an Africa that everybody will see that the footprints or that we left behind are great. And we are in a great nation. I'm so pleased to be in South Africa because of one of the global icons called Nelson Mandela, who say that education is the only weapon that can change the world. I'm so privileged to be on a platform of that country that this quote was made by the global icon who is still speaking to us until today. Is it possible for us who is seated here this afternoon to also fight the Madiba in us in terms of the education? Education gives us the human capital that we need. All of us that are seated here this afternoon, we are a product of the teachers. We are products of educationists. We can all agree to that if it was not for a particular teacher, at some point in your life, you'd not be here this afternoon. So I got here on Monday and I came across this. And I said, this is a country that is speaking so much into my heart because all of us are trying to fight the Madiba in us. And when I saw this, I said, I'll have to carry it with me because education is the foundation for tomorrow. So let's do it well. Mediocrity is no longer acceptable. Thank you, fellow experts.
All right, so I'm the CEO of Gini Institute. So I was listening to two of the previous speakers that came before me. So one of the points that was brought was about the role of vocational education in assisting our economies. And another point that was also brought up, which I felt that was very important, besides vocational education, it was to be able to resolve the inequality. The slides that I would have wanted to have there basically links up three different sectors. Number one, the job market. Number two, the education. And I would say number three, our social conditions, mostly in South Africa. So a recent study showed that we have in the job market 15% of the skilled people only who are contributing to the economy as skilled. So which means that if you imagine out of 100% of the population, only 15% are skilled, and then you ask yourself what is happening to the remaining 85. So out of the 85, 18% are semi-skilled. So these are people who become, if you want, machine operators, shop owners. And then you find 32% underneath that are completely unskilled. And then 35% that are completely unemployed. Now, the reason why we've got that inequality, which has been spoken of even by the Oxfam report, it's simply because we have a minority which previously had access to high socioeconomic conditions, high quality primary, as well as high quality secondary school. So in a nutshell, what I would say is this: to resolve the disparity or the big inequality that we've got in the job market, which manifests itself as an inequality in terms of wealth, vocational training is the answer. But if vocational training is the answer, one of the way that should really be appropriate is to use the right vocational training, which has been demonstrated by Finland, which is the vision that we've got a Gini Institute in order to resolve that particular skill shortage. Thank you very much.
Energy has become nearly as important as water. For protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to have a look at my first slide. Now this slide, I trust you can see it. It's a representation of the world and the energy distribution in it. I think you'll immediately spot two things. The one is where energy is represented with the lights. And the other one, you will spot the opportunities in the rest of the world that can still be pursued. Now, if you look at Africa, South America, and Australia, you can see a lot of opportunity. The downside of it is the fact that we obviously developed a little slower than some parts of the world. The upside of it is it can be done with new technology. And one of the things that's really moved a lot over the last 10, 15 years is exactly technology in the energy space. The other thing that we need to realize, before I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that, is the day when I was born. If you logged into a computer which didn't exist then, and you got my unique ID, it would say something like 3.5 billion and something. Okay. So when I was born, I was just over number 3.5 billion on this earth. Now, how you believe in life will have a reference to how long the earth has been existed and we as humans. Let's work with 10,000 years. In my lifespan of 50 years, the earth has doubled in people. There are now 7 billion people. Means the competition has doubled in my lifetime. People thinking about solutions doubled in my lifetime. So it's quite an interesting thing to think that we all 7 billion fit into that picture. In terms of the energy and the future of energy, I'm quickly going to cover 4 topics. The one is supply side, the one is demand side, storage, and the much talked about thing called the Internet of Things, or Industry 4.0, or the 4th Industrial Revolution, whatever you want to call it. Let us start with supply side. Currently, 85% of the world is supplied with fossil fuels. That's oil, gas, and coal. 85% of that. The downside of that, and why are we trying to move away from it, is the fact that it produces carbon dioxide, and that pollutes our environment and is part of the global warming theory at the moment. So that's why we're trying to move away from it. But it's the benefit of that, it's fairly cheap energy. It's cheap generation, which is not good generation. It's called dirty. Okay. The upside is where we now look at renewables. And if I remember the latest stats, half of France is generated by some form of nuclear. Spain, Germany, a big portion of wind. The upside of renewable energy is the fact that the impact is less on our planet. And with reference back to my 7 billion people, currently we are living the earth at twice, or consuming the earth at twice the rate it can afford us. So they reckon by 2050, we'll run out of our first big resources. So there's a massive drive to generate electricity in a responsible way. The downside of renewables at the moment is base load, and I'll talk about storage, and it's still fairly expensive. But there are billions, if it's not trillions of dollars and euros going into research to get it affordable. And we can see that if you just go and Google the cost of a solar panel, how it has decreased over the last 10, 15 years. If we go to demand side, so the shift in future on supply side will be from the dirty to the clean. One of the other things that we now realize as humans, when there are only a few humans around, we adapt the earth to our environment. We now realize that as humans, we can actually adapt to our environment, being 7 billion people and living with it. So the point is we need to learn and educate ourselves how to use energy as a resource. Because between water, and ask the Western Cape, when they ran out of water, people taught themselves how to handle a scarce resource. Now that there's some water, in the dams when I was there 2 years ago, it was 14%, it's now about 50%. People are using less water because they now realize it's a scarce commodity, the same as energy, but we don't really put the same theory and practice to energy at this moment. And that's why, I don't want to go too technical, we get tariffs that they say is time of use. So soon you will realize that your electricity bill will depend on when you use your power. So what are we seeing on the demand side? We're seeing education. We need to get people to understand that electricity is exactly, or energy is exactly the same as water. It's a scarce resource becoming more and more expensive, and we're killing our own environment with it. On a good example of how far it's gone, 10, 15 years ago, you would have had an incandescent light of 100 watt. It will now be replaced by a LED emissive diode or LED light, and that's 5 watt for very much the same light. So on the demand side, we're seeing lots of developments. We're seeing the demand of electricity and energy. And where is that creating a bit of a crisis? Is in the municipal, the Eskom space. Of course, your sales will start going down. Right, the third thing I said I want to chat about is storage. Why do we need storage? As a supplier, you will always have load. If you are a municipality or Eskom, there will always be load. Now with coal, we can generate 24 hours a day. With renewables, if it's wind, it only generates when there's wind. When there's sun, it can only generate when there's sun. But the demand will be there when the sun is not available or the wind is not available. And that is why we talk about storage. So we try and harvest the wind energy, store it, and tonight when there are no wind available or sun available, we'll put it back into the grid. Storage is the other aspect where massive money goes in at the moment, because that will keep, storage is how much, give you an example, you all know, and I don't want to use a brand as an example. If you buy, let me take a specific one, if you buy an electric car at the moment, you might pay for an average one about 200,000. After 6 or 7 years to replace the batteries will cost you 500,000. Because storage is still very expensive. but it's something a lot of technology goes into, and it's an environment that is lively contested. Some of you will hear about the new things on battery charging and life cycle and load and discharge cycles. It's actually capacitive charging. And you will see storage growing in sort of heaps and bounds going forward. The last one, the Internet of Things. So how can the Internet impact on energy? Let me give you an example. Years and years back in America, there was a program called Dallas. And when there was a break in the middle, America had a spike of energy usage because everyone ran to the loo, started making coffee, all the geysers switched on because people used hot water, and they actually had to change the time zones when the program is presented to just get the load where it should be. So what happens, if you watch sport and there's a break in the middle, everyone runs and they put on their kettles, and it spikes the network and it stretches the network. But with smart technology, the technology you will see there's a spike on the kettle usage. It will switch off a geyser. So it'll flatten out the use, because an energy network doesn't want to be, it's with a generator. You don't want to step up and step down and step up and step down. You want to run at a base load. And the ability that smart environments provide is the fact that all equipment can talk to each other and then have what we call a load factor, a very flat load factor. So those are the four things I think will have the biggest impact in the energy space going forward. And then in closure, I want to just chat about women in energy and the role of women, and I need this slide for it. And while you look at it, I'm just going to take a sip of water. If you look at that dress, tell the person next to you what's the color of it. Do we all agree it's white and gold, or is it blue and black? Okay, I hear blue and black. So are we all clear that it's blue and black?
Yes.
I hear no there. Okay, so who sees white and gold? So how can we all look at the same picture but to see two different colors? It's because of diversity, and I'm not going to give you the science behind it. Whether we believe it or not, there are things, when two people look at it, they get different answers. And it's called diversity or duality. I work with a company called Matleng Energy Solutions. It's a woman-owned company, that's why I have no hair. But the bottom line is, what we need to realize in future business, that there are so many opportunities and so many answers to the same question. And all of those can be from a different angle. And the very important thing in business is diversity. So that you have diversity, and diversity means women and men, youth and old, different cultures, different generations. Because two things will happen. The more diverse you are, the better your answer will be to the problem or to the challenge. And secondly, never forget the diversity of your clients. We serve a very diverse world than we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So the role that women plays, they look at life differently than men. And you can never generalize. There are women that can see what men can see, and there are men that can see what women can see. But generally in a group, a woman brings diversity, and I can actually spend the whole day on it. That's my passion, to understand how differently people look at life. And then how do you put a team together of people that appreciate the fact that we see life differently. And I want to credit women specifically with that. And that is why in future we will need them in business. If you look at the performance